Salutations! Welcome to Spiritual Blitherings, Philosophical Ponderings, and Everything Ramblings at the Hopeful Humanist Cafe. This is a Just Some Guy production, and I'm that guy, your host Steve, the Hopeful Humanist. Today we're going to talk about ideas and flow of the good life and resources for our spiritual toolbox. I'm enjoying a strawberry peanut butter smoothie with a hint of honey. It's a warm day, so I think it's more conducive to a cool, refreshing smoothie as opposed to my usual go-to tea, dandelion tea. Actually, I've been drinking some chamomile tea a little bit more often in the last number of weeks. You know, I just find the idea of drinking chamomile tea very relaxing, very refreshing. So let's have maybe a thought that can kind of enhance that picture a little bit more. We live in the age of anxiety. We live in a world where it's hard to be healthy. We live in a world where the pace of life is moving at an unsustainable rate. We got a lot of things on our plate. So we're all hoping, I think, at some point each and every day to have a moment of refuge, of sanctuary. So here's a little quote from Awakening the Buddha Within. Yes, I'm back in terms of referencing that book by Lama Suridas. And this is the image that's being painted. Leave the body at rest like an unmovable mountain. Leave the speech at rest like an unstrung guitar. Leave the mind at rest like a shepherd after dark who has brought his flock home and sits content by the warm fire. Beautiful. So, I got a lot of things on my plate. I'm thinking I'm not any different or any more special than anyone else. I'm assuming most people have a lot of things on their plate. And it seems the more that piles up on our plates, the more stressed we might become, the more anxious, more overwhelmed. It's just like, when are we going to tackle all these things? And it seems that we might end up getting one or two things off of our plate. And while we're doing that, 3 or 4 other additional things are piling up onto, being added onto our plate. And it feels like it's we're in a situation where we're not going to get ahead. So what can we do to try to remedy this predicament, this dilemma? So I'm going to offer a little activity that I think might allow us to create some perspective, and when we get some perspective, hopefully open up room for some calm in our lives, so that each and every day there might be a moment where we can breathe calmly, deeply, serenely, peacefully. I think that sounds delightful. Just at the back of the house right now, looking outside, and I can hear the birds singing. It's a beautiful day, right? Sometimes we've got so much going on in our coconuts that we lose sight of what's right in front of us. And so the activity I'd like to share hopefully will allow us to open up to those wonderful, beautiful, serene presenting moments that if we're not careful, we're going to lose sight of. So the activity that I like to share to stand up to anxiety is called the Things on My Plate Mind Map. So you can imagine we're going to somehow try to capture this idea that our lives is, captured in the image of a plate, and that there's all these things that we need to tend to do, chores, responsibilities, work, and they've piled up on our plate, and it's creating some distress, dis-ease, because there's just not enough time in a day, as the expression goes. So how are we going to tackle it? Right? And we got to keep in mind, in terms of tackling it, there are things that if we do these things, feeding and extinguishing, the fire of, good mental health, right? Like, if I want to feed the fire of good mental health, then I can do some yoga, I can do some mindfulness. A person that I respect and admire described that whole self-care focus as somatic palliation. It's kind of like taking care of the body. But there was always a discussion that that doesn't change the fact that you still have a plate with lots of stuff on it, and it has to be addressed. So what are you going to do? So if you have a whiteboard, that could be helpful in terms of this activity. I prefer getting a large paper plate because I feel like it really kind of makes concrete this idea of the metaphor of things on my plate. All right? And once you have your whiteboard, you draw a picture of a plate, a big plate on that whiteboard. Or if you have a plate, a big white paper plate, and you got a pen, the next thing would be the listing, right? What are those things that we have on our plates? What are the things on our plates? And writing all those things down, whatever they might be, right? In terms of errands, household chores, duties, responsibilities, different things that we might need to follow up with in terms of, one of the things that is quite time consuming is if, you have a benefits package of some sort, for chiropractic benefit to, get an adjustment, or massage therapy, or if you're going to see a counselor, and instead of envisioning it as someone that you're doing therapy with, and you can imagine that this is your life coach, and you want to talk with them to elevate levels of happiness during the COVID-19 crisis, right? Once you go to your visit, your professional consultation, then you have to submit all these forms. Sometimes you're taking pictures and then attachments and filling out forms, and there's a lot of things that we have to do, and they'll differ from one person to another person in terms of the things on a person's plate. But I think it will not be a stretch to imagine that pretty soon, if you give yourself 7 to 10 minutes of just listing all those things that need to be done, that need to be addressed, that need to be tackled, that for most of us, our plates get filled up pretty quick, right? So, take a moment, maybe put the episode on pause. You're in front of your whiteboard, or you have your paper plate, your large paper plate, and just take 7 to 10 minutes and write down all those things that you need to do that you haven't yet done, that are just kind of occupying your attention, that you just seem to kind of intrusively pop into each and every moment that you might find yourself in. And then come back. Okay, so hopefully people took a little moment, and now we're back, and you have that plate and it's in front of you. You're either holding it, it's a paper plate, or it's a whiteboard. You've got all those different things that you need to address. My goal is to say, what is it that we can do about this reality so that we can create some perspective and we can create some calm, right? I think one of the first things we might want to do is just take a breath and recognize that the breath itself becomes a helpful way to standing up to the reality of all those things that need to get done. So take a couple breaths. And now maybe take a moment and just with yourself, recite the Serenity Prayer, right? Just kind of like a reminder. Like we're kind of going to look at that list and ask ourselves, like, what are the things that I'm responsible for? What are the things that are, within the circle of my control? And what are the things that are outside the circle of my control? Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so there might be some things that we can kind of take off the plate right away when we recognize that we actually can't do anything about those situations. Perhaps they're challenges, stressors, situations that belong to other people that impact us, and that would then be my feelings about someone else's struggle, right? And what will you do then in terms of those feelings that you're having? So just taking a moment, saying the Serenity Prayer, recognizing what belongs to us, what doesn't belong to us, what can we tackle, what are the things that we can do something about, right? And then we'll focus on those. Now we have to recognize that if the challenge was to tackle everything on your plate simultaneously, all at once, it'd be like stuffing too much food into our mouths and we would choke. We can't do that. We have to create some perspective. We have to kind of create a plan for moving forward. So we have to ask ourselves, based on our life situations, what is it that when we look at the things that need to be addressed, tackled, handled, what is the way in which we want to proceed? Do we want to proceed by kind of rating them and tackling them from least challenging to most challenging? Least intrusive to most intrusive? Most pressing to least pressing? Do we want to tackle the things that are like dominating our thoughts and get the hard stuff out of the way and then make our way to the easier stuff? What is the approach that's going to work for you? I often like to proceed from least challenging to most challenging, so I can get a couple successes and then I can kind of feel good about myself and then start building momentum. I become aware of my strengths. I realize the resources that I have available. I can recruit other people to support me in whatever endeavor I might then be facing that's a little more trying, a little bit more difficult. So for me, I would kind of be tackling that list by saying, out of the things on my plate, and let's imagine 7 of them, there's 7 things on my plate. What is the thing that is most approachable? The least demanding challenge on the plate? And then I'd say, okay, well, that's number 1. That's okay. And then I would proceed number 2, number 3, all the way up to number 7, and saying, like, number 7 is the thing that's going to take a lot of energy, a lot of focus, a lot of resources, recognition of my strengths, support from other people. But I'm gonna tackle the thing that's easiest. I'm gonna get a check mark, and I'm gonna try to get some momentum. And that to do that, once I look at the rank order of proceeding, and I identify that, this number one is the one that I'm going to tackle first, you got to get an action plan together. Right? So what are the things that you can do, those behavioral action steps that you can take that'll allow you to tackle the most approachable problem? For us, in my household, me and my wife, we had a fly problem not too long ago. We're like, somehow the flies are getting into the house. And then, there's a whole bunch of other challenges because of the COVID-19, people, the uncertainty about the future, financial, just concern about how things are going to work out because of a volatile economy, a volatile job market. So it's like, okay, well, we don't control the economy, right? But these flies, how are these flies getting in? Let's tackle that one. It's definitely on our plate because, you don't want flies infesting your home. And we recognized on one of our windows that there are these openings, and that the flies could be getting access to our house. We didn't really even understand why these holes are there in the first place. It's interesting. But so we taped them up. Now we've arrived at a point where we seem to have solved that problem, right? The action plan would have been, okay, well, when are we going to do it? Okay, we're going to do it tomorrow. What are we going to need? Well, we're going to need a ladder. We're going to need some duct tape. And we're going to need some scissors, and we're going to tape up what could look like entranceways into the home for the flies, so that we can eliminate, that intrusion. And so that's the action plan. And then after you get that action plan, you pull it off, then you can say, okay, you got your check mark, right? So when I picture my things on my plate, my map, I picture that in addition to the list of things that you've got on your plate, that you rank order them in terms of priority, in terms of the procession of tackling them, and then you have a little check mark box that eventually, when you have your action plan, which you just kind of have right beside the thing that needs to be the thing you need to get done, and you're like, okay, action plan, get ladder, get duct tape, get scissors, and pick a day, and pick a time, do it, right? And that once you get that, you get a check mark, and it feels good. The dopamine starts firing in the coconut, and you get that feel good moment, which then allows you to have some energy that you can feed off to start tackling the next activity that is waiting to be addressed, that needs to be addressed, that needs to be tackled. Okay. So that is something that I have in the past done with myself. With a person could do it with oneself. So you can kind of get a sense of, okay, am I worrying about some things that I really don't have any control over, that are not within the realm of my circle of control? Okay, so let's just kind of put them off to the side. Let's just kind of bracket them and put them on the shelf. But what legitimately are some of the things that need to be done that I can do? List them, decide, how to proceed in terms of, the sequence of check marks, the rank ordering. Put your action plan in brief off to the side, and then get to work. And once you get to work, you get your check marks, and you create momentum for just tackling that plate. Now, the thing I think we need to be aware of is that at some point, there's always going to be more things to go on that plate. There's going to be more things that will go on that plate. But if we can step back and get perspective, we might be able to each and every day create a moment of calm for ourselves. Right? So while we're tackling the things on my plate, mind map, we also want to make sure we're engaging in self-care. The other thing I'd like to mention is, the things on my plate mind map could be really helpful for individuals who are thinking they might need to go to counseling, or if, to frame it differently, to connect with a life coach. Because I think it was episode 33, how to prepare for a counseling session. And if you go to a counseling session and you don't have an idea of a starting point, what to tackle, it could be very overwhelming and very disappointing, walking away feeling like nothing was accomplished because you had all these ideas that, all these things on your plate, you wanted to address them all simultaneously, immediately, and be done with them and transcend. And that's just not realistic, right? So if someone was thinking about going to a counseling session, the things on my plate mind map is an essential tool for the preparation process for the first meeting. And right now, many people are finding that it's very beneficial and convenient to seek out counseling because a lot of it's being done online. And you can have Zoom sessions or you can have phone sessions. I think a lot of people are preferring the phone sessions because it's not as intimidating in terms of like seeing yourself up on the screen and getting self-conscious while also thinking like you're kind of being looked at or put under the microscope, which is not the case, but that's how at times it might feel, right? So I think like right now, I would encourage almost anyone, just in terms of elevating levels of happiness, to seek out counseling and to view the reaching out as if you're connecting with a life coach, and that the life coach can help you figure out things that you can do to elevate levels of happiness. And one way that we can elevate levels of happiness is to tackle the things on our plate. And when you're going to a session, if you have an idea of like, I need to talk about this, or I need to talk about that, or okay, so out of all those things you need to talk about, which should you talk first? Which is the thing you should tackle to get off your plate first? And once again, I would encourage the idea of tackling the most approachable, the less challenging stuff, creating your action plan, getting your check mark, and then proceeding to the harder stuff. For some other people, though, they inwardly know, their inner voice is telling them no. Like, I am just becoming overwhelmed and incapacitated because of this dominating, intrusive thought of some sort, and I need to tackle this before I can get some clarity and I can even function on all the other levels. So it depends on the individual, right? It depends where you are in your life circumstance. But generally speaking, I think there could be some benefits to starting with the least challenging, the least difficult, the most approachable, getting your check marks and moving forward. So yeah, I've been talking about 23 minutes now about what really, if you filter it down, is really a straightforward exercise. And I think that it could be really beneficial. So I will leave this conversation with that as the end point of this thought. And as I do that, I'm coming to my backyard. I'm recognizing, I've got a lot of things on my plate. I'm going to figure out how to tackle them. But what a beautiful day, right? And if today I am able to, maybe I'll tackle something on my plate. I'll get my check mark. And then I think I'm going to give myself permission to take a moment, celebrate the accomplishment, and do something that's calming, something that's relaxing, and Perhaps that could be taking a walk. Perhaps that could be a hot bath. Perhaps that could be a strawberry, peanut butter, honey smoothie. Perhaps that could be watching something funny. So, thank you for joining me for this conversation about the things on my plate, mind map. Peace, take care, be well, and share.